Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'm teacher Ahmed Jamul. I'm glad to talk about document 2 of chapter 15, Cyclic Evolution of the Ovarian Hormones. Back in document 1 of this chapter, you learned that both ovaries and uterus are characterized by cyclic and synchronized modifications. But why are the uterine and ovarian cycles synchronized? How are the uterus and the ovary related? And what's the nature of this relationship? To answer these questions, let's check the experiments performed on female mice in document A of your book, page 296. I want you to pause the video for a while and interpret the experiments of document A. At the beginning, a lot of control mice with intact ovaries shows a cyclic development of the endometrium, while a bilateral ovaryectomy or a removal of both ovaries for another lot of mice leads to the absence of the development of the endometrium. This means that the development of the endometrium is dependent on the ovaries. In other words, the ovaries stimulate the development of the endometrium. But in the third experiment, when an ovaryectomy of both ovaries is followed by a graft of the ovaries under the skin, the cyclic development of the endometrium is conserved, which means that the ovary stimulates the cyclic development of the uterus independent of its location, and thus the relationship between ovaries and uterus must be through bloodstream. This is confirmed by the fact that when the mice with no ovaries are injected with ovarian extracts, the development of the endometrium occurs again, which indicates that the ovaries must be secreting chemicals into blood, and the uterus is the target organ of those chemicals. But as you noticed in the results of the fourth experiment, the uterine development upon daily injections of ovarian extracts doesn't happen in a cyclic manner. This indicates that the ovaries must be secreting its chemicals in a cyclic manner and not in a constant daily manner. Actually, an ovary is an endocrine gland. Like all other endocrine glands, the ovary secretes hormones into the bloodstream. The hormones circulate blood to reach their target cells. Well, the target cells of the ovarian hormones are the cells of the uterine endometrium. And since those hormones are secreted by the ovary in a variable cyclic manner, the development of the endometrium is also cyclic. And that's why uterine cycle is synchronized with the ovarian cycle. In this document, you will learn about the hormones secreted by the ovaries, the ovarian cells responsible for their secretion, and how does their secretion vary throughout the ovarian cycle. And finally, you will relate the variation in the secretion of the ovarian hormones to the uterine cycle. Before we start, let's recall the anatomy of the ovary and the structures found in it. You already know that the ovaries contain developing tertiary follicles during the follicular phase, while after being ruptured, the follicle turns into a corpus luteum that persists in the ovary during the luteal phase. In the tertiary follicles, the granulosa and the cells of the theca interna secrete the female hormone estrogen. On the other hand, the cells of the corpus luteum secretes two female hormones, estrogen and progesterone. Now, to understand how does the secretion of both estrogen and progesterone vary, I want you to think of the events that occur during the ovarian cycle. Remember how the follicle grows during the follicular phase. You must know that this growth is due to the multiplication of the different follicular cells. Now, as the follicle grows bigger, what do you think will happen to the amount of estrogen secreted by the ovary? Is it going to increase or decrease? And when the follicular cells turn into luteal cells, what will happen to the amount of secreted progesterone? Document B of your books shows the variation of both estrogen and progesterone during the ovarian cycle. You can obviously see that the follicular phase of this cycle is characterized by the absence of progesterone. The phase is also characterized by the progressive increase in the amount of estrogen, which reaches its maximum value or peak just before ovulation. On the other hand, the luteal phase is characterized by the dual secretion of both estrogen and progesterone. Based on your understanding of the events occurring in the ovary, you can easily explain the variations of both estrogen and progesterone. As the follicles progressively grow bigger, the number of follicular cells increases, and thus the amount of secreted estrogen also increases. This amount reaches its peak when the follicle becomes a Graafian follicle. But once this follicle ruptures, the amount of estrogen drops. Then after the formation of the corpus luteum, which secretes both estrogen and progesterone, the amount of both hormones increases. But as the corpus luteum regresses, by the end of the luteal phase, the amount of both hormones decreases again. Now that you discovered the reason behind the cyclic variations of the ovarian hormones, you still need to know why is this cycle synchronized with the uterine cycle. To answer this question, you should know first the role of each ovarian hormone. Document A has already proved that the main target organ of ovarian hormones is the uterus, specifically the endometrium. Actually, the cervix and the vagina are target organs too. Document C of your books shows the biological effect of each ovarian hormone on their target organs. Estrogen, for example, stimulates the multiplication of both uterine and vaginal mucosa, which refer to the inner lining of the two organs. It stimulates the development of the tube-like glands of the endometrium as well as the cervical glands. Estrogen also stimulates the growth of blood vessels. On the other hand, progesterone stimulates the secretion in the uterine mucosa and the cervix. It also stimulates the development of spiral arterioles in the endometrium and inhibits the contraction of the uterus but increases the body temperature. So once you know the effect of each hormone, you will easily be able to explain the modifications that occur to the endometrium during the different phases of the uterine cycle. During the proliferative phase, the superficial layer of the endometrium gradually thickens due to the multiplication of its cells under the effect of estrogen. Tube-like glands also appear in this phase, while in the secretory phase of the cycle, the development of the endometrium becomes even more amplified and the spiral arterioles appear. The endometrium looks like lace and it's called the uterine lace by now. Finally, when the level of both hormones drop, cells of endometrium degenerate and the superficial layer sloughs off, causing menses.